I think that what we were doing was really rehearsing which of the 2 evenings of the week would be ideal for a soap opera yet to be named, which turned out to be EastEnders. And oddly enough, the whole thing has sort of come full circle in that this weekend there has been shown in Britain a celebration of the 30th anniversary of Doctor Who, combining the programme Doctor Who and EastEnders. The TARDIS actually arrives in London and gets embroiled with characters from EastEnders in a 2-part mini-adventure. And it's also in 3D, a very exciting new technology that I don't think we've seen the end of. And the story features all 5 living Doctors, 12 of the companions, a multitude of characters from EastEnders. I'm sure the people who watch EastEnders, they'll be their favourite in it somewhere, even if it's just as a walk-on. And a multitude of monsters, something like 20 different monsters. And I think that, in a way, there's a certain irony that there we were rehearsing the slot for EastEnders, which is now, incidentally, as of last week, the most popular show on British television, in positions number 1 and 2. It's actually finally beaten Coronation Street.
Thank goodness for that. I was going to talk with you about what the American fans are beginning to call the halftime without a Super Bowl. In regards to this program, this 12-minute thing in 3D.
Yeah.
But since you've already beaten me at the bush in regards to that, I appreciate the information. But speaking of Bush, Bonnie Langford, who played Melanie Bush, was to more or less express a joke, from what I understood, was practically responsible for Alexei Sayle's career success, being the butt of his jokes on television and whatnot. But fans wanted to know if the selection of Bonnie was more or less influenced by the BBC to keep the show in check when it returned, because Bonnie, I understood, had a big following with the children, I think, doing Cracker Jack, I think the name of the show was called. Or was it more a matter of calming down the front office from Doctor Who's point of view?
No, you've got a lot of misinformation there. I don't think Bonnie has ever appeared on Cracker Jack.
My apologies on that.
Cracker Jack was actually a programme that was cancelled when Doctor Who was rested in 1985,
okay.
And Cracker Jack never came back. But no, I don't think Bonnie was ever involved with that. I cast Bonnie, it was my idea, and the reason I cast her was I thought that she was right for the part. I also thought that in returning to the show, bringing in somebody who already had a name as a companion would also help in terms of publicity to refresh people's memory and to keep the show in high profile. So I take full responsibility for that. It was not a popular decision with many of the fans in Britain, but I think one's got to keep the perspective of fans with a small f and fans with a big F. Fans with a big F who are members of the Appreciation Society in Britain, total 2,500 people. And over the years, for instance, when we were doing that twice weekly, we were getting 10.5 million people. So I think one's got to view the comments of the fans, in context.
Speaking of which, I know a fan favorite as of late had been Sophie Aldred. Sophie had told me when I interviewed her about 10 days ago that she did not audition for the part of A. She went to see Chris Clow, who was directing Dragonfire, and then she went to you for the final approval. And then she went back to Chris Clow, and then she found out that you had just selected her in a way that required no test reading, really no auditions whatsoever. And she told me that she more or less owes her career success to you, because she says if it weren't for you, she wouldn't more or less be doing what she's doing right now. And
yes, but it was a weird situation in a way, in that at the end of that season, there were 2 stories, both of which featured a possible ongoing character. There was a young girl in the story Dragonfire, and there was a young girl in the story Delta and the Bannermen. And the script editor, Andrew Cutmell, and I couldn't decide which one we should end the season on. And so consequently, the casting of both these girls involved my office in a very major way, because whichever one went out last would possibly hold the key to staying on in the show as a companion. but I'm delighted that it was Ace. I certainly don't think that Sophie was right for the other part. I'm not saying she couldn't have played it, but I don't think she was right for it. She was always much righter for Ace, and I think that the combination of Ace with Doctor Number 7, Sylvester McCoy, is probably one of the most successful combinations in the show's entire history.
A lot of fans will wholeheartedly agree on that. How does one know where the chemistry exists in a great Doctor companion team?
How does
one know where the chemistry exists?
I think it has to be a kind of, if you could sort of bottle that kind of chemistry, one would be the next multimillionaire. I think that it is very much a kind of instinctive chemistry that happens between two people who are working together, and something additional gels in front of the camera. And something that I think, is particularly applaudable in the work that Sophie and Sylvester do.
On to the future now with the New Adventures, which Virgin Books is doing very well with on both coasts. How is your liking to the novels in the treatment of the characters?
I have to confess that I only have limited knowledge of those New Adventures. Not now being the kind of resident Doctor Who producer, although I've just guested on this Children in Need thing that I was talking about earlier. I find some of the things that have developed that I have read slightly odd. But then I'm a sweet old-fashioned thing hankering after my old days. I think it's right that the show should develop, so I'm not knocking what Peter Darvill-Evans is doing with the books. I think it does need to go forward, but I think it would be preferable that the development of characters, the development of situations, the development of the whole premise of the show, I think it would be infinitely preferable if that was done on television first, rather than in a literary fashion first.
Sophie Aldred told me that she didn't like the idea of Ace being a warmonger in these books, and she had wanted to see her more as a pacifist like the Doctor, but then again she admitted that she hasn't even read the books yet. So basically, I take it a lot of people involved with the show really don't know how things have turned out because they haven't taken a look at the texts.
Fortunately, not had the time, I guess.
Your participation with the video releases, which is something that you've more or less gotten involved with after the cancellation. I can't say that word truthfully because I have optimism it's coming back. But did that somehow convince the BBC that they didn't really need to make a new series, that they can just go ahead and sell sell rehashed stories or missing episodes, tie up the loose ends, and just make a buck, and that's the way things are going to be?
Well, I think that's a very simplistic view, if I may say so. I think that inevitably there is a buck to be made, but you don't have to be a great mathematician to work out that those bucks are going to run out in the not-too-distant future. In the United Kingdom, they release 12 full stories a year, usually plus 3 specials. Specials being, an unfinished story or a mini documentary about the Daleks. Well, that is a hell of a lot of material. And it's been doing that for several years, and I don't think it'll be many years before those video releases run out. I know that you get them slightly slower over here in the States, so it would hang on longer, but I really don't think that anyone thinks that's a substitute, for making new product.
When the show comes back, how would you like to see it?
I have actually sort of said in print and in a documentary that goes out tonight in the UK that I see this Children in Need thing as my absolute sort of farewell to Doctor Who. Although it's only 12 minutes, it has brought together every single living Doctor, all of them in costume, all of them recording material specifically for this, rather than material that was left over from a junk story or something. And it's brought back so many of the companions and so many of my old team that I really feel that's the end of Doctor Who for me. What I think it needs for the future is a new team with new ideas and a whole new aegis that will take the show forward into the next century.